In this episode, I talk with Don McAllister on how he teaches people every single week through his screencasts.
Welcome to the Online Course Coach Podcast, brought to you by TrueFocusMedia.com. Whether you're a beginner or expert, this is the podcast for the latest in online course creation tips, news, interviews, and ideas. And here's your coach, Jeff Long.
Welcome back to another episode, and I'm really excited for this episode, and I'm sure you're going to get sick of me saying that because I love all these episodes. To be honest, one of the reasons I started this podcast was to talk with these people because there are so many cool people doing cool things out there. And today I get to talk with Don McAllister of Screencastsonline.com. And I've been listening to Don McAllister for years. I was trying to think, what year I started to listen to him. I'm guessing at least maybe 2007, 2008 or so, maybe earlier, maybe a little later. He has been a fixture on some of the Mac podcasts that I've been listening to for years. And so it's been very interesting to kind of see him as he got started and propelled to this place of where he's looked at as an authority. And he should, because he has the knowledge, the experience, and he has served and helped a lot of people. So I wanted to get him on one of these early shows because, again, I look up to him, I respect him, but I know he has a lot of valuable insights for people that are wanting to create content, for people that are wanting to create tutorials, screencasts, and teaching people online. And what's interesting, Don makes money. We don't talk about the specifics, but he makes a living from it. I hope it's a very good living. He deserves it. But in a way, he's an educator, and I ask him about that. Do you consider yourself an educator or somebody that's just in technology? And we have that discussion, and I think it's very interesting because, to me, the more people you serve, the more people you teach and train, the more you usually get reimbursed for that in the form of money. And that's a fantastic thing. So Don shares a couple things like how he got started. I think his background is really interesting, and I know you'll like that. And then he talks about how he sets up for his screencasts because it's a very complex system. If you've ever done screencasts, while there are simple parts to it, the whole process, especially at Don's level, is quite complex. And he even goes into how he brainstorms for each topic. So please listen to that as well, because for some of you that are creating content, whether it's a course, maybe you do it a couple times a year, or maybe you create one course and that's your main content, you can learn from his system as well. But especially for those of you that are creating regular content, even if it's blogs or podcasts or videos, I think you can really learn from his setup on how he brainstorms for each topic because he does several screencasts each week. And then he also gives some advice to somebody that wants to just start out creating courses or screencasts or things like that. So if you're just starting out, you listen to Don, you're thinking, man, he is, way above me, way beyond me. How could I ever reach that level? Don has some very good words, some very good advice to people that are just starting out. It's my goal in these interviews to bring you different people doing different things. So we might talk to somebody in the university level that's doing e-learning in some capacity. We might talk to somebody that's doing some innovative online courses for artists. And then we have somebody like Don that's doing some really cool screencast type videos, as well as he's taking this a step beyond that. We'll talk about his online university, his online magazine. And so there's ways to, once you create that content, to use it in different places or to serve people in different ways beyond just maybe an online course or a screencast. And so, keep coming back. I want to make sure that you don't think that we're only going to be targeting a certain type of online course, but we're going to learn from the gamut because I think there are ways we can learn from every different type of person that's doing online courses and e-learning and screencasting. So that's why I wanted to bring Don on the show here today. I know you'll learn a lot from him, and I can't wait to hear what you learned from this interview. I want to alert you to something that I'll give you more information at the end of this podcast, but just a little teaser here. I asked Don something that I think you'll find really interesting. He has a big business. He does a lot of things, a lot of, moving parts. So I asked him, what are some of the productivity tools that you use to run your business? And I know you'll love his answers and you'll love his apps and his suggestions. And I actually put that in an extended audio version that you can download for free on the site. So go to onlinecoursecoach.com/Don to download that for free, and you can learn what productivity tools Don uses, and I know you're going to find a lot of value in that. So go to the website, check it out. Again, I talk about it later in the podcast towards the end, but I wanted to make sure you got that information so you could get that bonus free audio. So I could talk on and on about this interview, but let's just get into this interview with Don McAllister. All right, I'm here with Don McAllister of Screencasts Online. And Don, thanks so much for being on the show here.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Jeff. No, really, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I said off air, I've been listening to you for many years, and I know that you actually got started around 2005, 2006 doing these online tutorials, screencasts, and you were one of the first ones. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to the point of starting there in 2005.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, to most people's surprise, it was actually 2005 that I first discovered the Mac. Because before then, I was actually a PC guy. I was working in corporate IT for many years, and I'd sort of lost my mojo. You know, I used to really enjoy playing with computers. I'd never really been exposed to Apple Macs before, because in the UK, where I'm based, to be honest, the penetration around that time and earlier was very limited, and it was literally just like, high-end design studios would have access to Apple gear. So in the olden days, I was a Windows guy, but I just sort of lost interest in Windows. And then I stumbled across a Steve Jobs keynote. It must have been a Macworld keynote in 2005, and it was during that keynote. I mean, I had no idea what Apple was all about, no idea about what software they ran, and in that particular keynote, they covered iPhoto books. They covered some of the software, and then at the end of the keynote, they actually introduced the Mac Mini. And it sort of, as I went through the hour-long presentation, I was getting more and more sort of interested in the things they were talking about. And then the Mac Mini was launched, and it seemed very affordable. And I already had my keyboard, I had my my monitor, so it seemed a fairly low risk investment to give it a try. It took a couple of months before they came to the UK, but when I actually got the Mac Mini, I was hooked within a couple of days. I actually started using the Apple, and in the course of a couple of weeks, I became an evangelist. I thought it was really, really good. It brought back the enjoyment of playing with computers and exploring and learning new stuff with computers. And the genesis of how I started to do the screencasts was basically, I wanted to show some of my relatives who also were thinking about getting a Mac. One of them actually did, and I wanted to show her how to do some of the basics. And I created a few sort of mini videos for them. So that was the start, and round about 2005 as well, podcasts had really just come onto the scene, and I was quite interested in podcasts. I started to follow a couple of podcasts, and I quite fancied the idea of doing a podcast. And my initial thought was to do like a Mac newbie type podcast, but when push came to shove, I sat down, I got the domain name sorted out. I understood how RSS worked and everything, but when I came to press the button and start recording, I just had nothing to, it was weird. And that was just going to be like an audio podcast. So I sort of shelved that. And then the realization that, well, hang on, once I'd done those couple of videos, I could actually, it's digital media. I could distribute these videos as a podcast. And that was the start of it, really. I started just to push out a couple of screencasts as a weekly podcast. And it sort of snowballed from there.
Man, that's great. And it reminds me how I got started with some teaching online stuff, very similar to you. I saw a need, and there weren't really any training videos on this topic. And I'm like, man, if I'm struggling with this, I'm sure people who don't have as much experience or knowledge are just floundering without it. So I think that's great, is that finding a need.
Yeah, and also the technology. I mean, I always enjoyed the technology, and I'd done a little bit of video production just on a hobby basis, but this was something new. This was doing the screen captures and using the iMovie at the time, I think it was, before I upgraded to Final Cut Pro, and just sort of learning how to put it together. Of course, it's a whole, doing a screencast is something quite different, because you're sort of describing what you're seeing on screen. You're actually demonstrating stuff and talking at the same time, and it can take a little bit of a knack to get into it, but I really enjoyed it. The problem was, in the early days, it took up so much time. It was like a whole weekend to produce like a 15-minute, 20-minute screencast, because people sometimes don't appreciate just how much work goes into actually generating one of these online video tutorials.
Sure. Yeah, no, that I can attest to that. And I think you brought up another good point of you wanted to start something, whether it's a audio podcast, video podcast. You bought the domain name, you sat down to record that audio podcast, and it sounds like you just, the excitement wasn't there, the passion, something wasn't there. And explain that. Why did you go away from that? Did it just feel like you weren't hitting the nail on the head?
Yeah, I think I just wasn't, I sort of focused too much on the technology and the backroom stuff.
Sure.
Without giving a lot of consideration as to what the actual content would be. So, when it came down to actually giving the content, it wasn't quite there. So I sort of had to, in effect, go back to the drawing board. But I'd sort of lost enthusiasm by that point.
I've done the exact same thing. And to the listener, focus on the one thing you absolutely have to do. If you're like most of us, we have all these ideas and we want to start them all. And we see people like Don who have great success. But if you're not passionate about it or good at it or interested in it, it doesn't matter how much money you eventually make, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it is it is, and especially in the early days, a labor of love, because initially it was a free podcast. So all these hours I was putting in, I was quite happy to just give away the content, and on knowing that people were enjoying it, and people were benefiting from it, because I was getting feedback from people saying, hey, this is great, et cetera, et cetera.
So where are you right now? I know you create, is it 2 episodes a week or is it more?
Yeah, no, it's 2 episodes a week. I do, I sort of about probably 18 months, 2 years ago, I split it from just a single show each week to a separate Mac and iOS show. Although I say separate, they are very much, as time moves on, becoming more and more intertwined. But I do normally around about 30-minute Mac show and 20-minute iOS show each week. And that goes out same time, normally on a Friday. Very occasionally I push it back to the Saturday, but I try to keep it as regular as possible on the same day, same time release.
Now, since you create regular content each week, how do you brainstorm for topics? How do you find what's a legitimate video you want to do versus one you just throw away or put on the shelf?
Yeah, the problem I have is that to do like a half an hour's worth of content, it needs to be something that you can delve into at a certain level. It has to be something that I'm particularly enamored with, or something I enjoy using, and also something that I think by sharing it, other people will get benefit from it. Now, sometimes it's a struggle. Sometimes I've got more stuff coming at me than I know what to do with. So it's very flux, really. I mean, the last couple of months, I'm pretty much restricted to doing, the new versions of the operating system. We've had OS 10 Yosemite came out, so that's a big piece of work. iOS 8 has come out as well. So probably the last 2 months have been really focused on those 2 updates. But then, there's plenty of new Mac apps coming out. There's sort of different types of topics as well that people like me to cover. I do take requests and suggestions from the audience as well, so they get some input. But I don't plan too far ahead. It's very much sort of 2 or 3 weeks maximum, unless I'm actually got an extended period of travel or something when I have to prepare lots of stuff in advance. But I try and keep it fairly contemporary, fairly up to date, so that I can be very flexible. So that if something comes out that I think is worthy of an immediate attention, I can sort of do that this week or next week.
What are some lessons you've learned along the way? And I know that's such a broad topic or a broad question, because so many directions you can go, but what are some kind of key lessons you've learned about yourself, the process, or even your audience throughout these years?
I think one of the big things that people always ask, because I work for myself, I work from home, I have my own setup, is to be disciplined, really, because, I still, although, you could quite easily be very flexible at the hours that you work, I tend to have a very strict regime of, a proper work day, a proper workspace. I do break that rule occasionally by, taking my laptop and watching the TV and still working
Sure.
and stuff like that. I'm sure everyone does that. But, just set up a regular regime and sort of get into the work mindset. But you can, it's very flexible because, I am working from home and I do sort of control my own destiny. So I have more flexibility than I would have in a normal 9 to 5 job. But again, you can't let that go too far. You have to discipline yourself to make sure, especially when you're working to such a strict set schedule of, regular content each week. You have to be fairly disciplined and hit certain milestones throughout the week to make sure that the end product is available at the end of the week to the paying audience.
Yeah, that I can definitely understand. I have some people I know that did come from the corporate environment, and they're used to, bosses and managers and people telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And then they come into their own, they are their own boss, or their clients are their own boss, and it's hard for them. And discipline is a big deal. I'm glad you brought that up. Now, I've heard some things about your Screencast. Well, let me back up. So Screencasts Online is your main website. That's where you've been doing these screencasts for years and years, and that's where you do these, 2 shows. But now you have Screencasts Academy. So what is it, and why did you create Screencasts Academy?
Right. Well, it's really a bit of an experiment. The issue that I have is that I'm producing all this regular content, and the people who do sign up as members really enjoy it. But a membership type system or weekly content isn't for everybody. Some people just dip in and dip out, which is fine. Some people religiously watch each show each week when it comes out. But some people aren't really, although they might be interested in their Mac or in their iPad or their iPhone, they're not really that interested. They actually want to see 45 minutes worth of training material each week. So the Academy was really set up to see whether or not there would be some opportunities to repackage some of the training that I've already done in discrete modules, so that the one that's currently on there is for the iWork suite of applications. So it's a single purchase. You just buy that particular course, and then you get access to that course, and then there's no ongoing commitment. You've got access to that course for as long as you want, and then over time I'm hoping to sort of bring in some more courses like the OS 10 Yosemite and the iOS 8 stuff that I've just completed, bring them into the Screencast Online Academy as a separate sort of purchasable product. And it's really to target those people that don't want the ongoing commitment of a membership, but would still like to have the occasional chunk of training for specific topics.
Sure. And that's great. I love that you're trying new things, trying different things, and listening to your audience, because that's who you're serving as well.
Yeah.
If you want to make them happy.
Yeah. The problem being, though, that it's a very small production house. Although I do have people helping me on the post-production side now, it's still very much I do the bulk of the work. So it's quite difficult to keep the weekly stuff going and to experiment with other things. But it's been fun. I've been using WordPress to set up the site and a few plugins and using Vimeo to distribute some of the video. So it's all and again, I like that sort of thing. I like to try new things and to keep abreast of what's going on.
So, Don, would you consider yourself an educator, a technologist, or something completely different?
That's a good question, actually. I don't know, really. I suppose a bit of everything. I don't think I could sort of pigeonhole myself into one particular area. But yeah, probably more. I don't know. I do keep abreast of what's going on. I do, as well as the training stuff, I do guest spots on various podcasts where I pontificate or do a bit of punditry. So I quite enjoy that now and again. So it's a bit of everything. But the Screencast Online is my main focus. So I suppose really, if you had to pin me down with something, I suppose it would be an educator.
That's interesting. Maybe an technologicator. Whatever the combination of technology and educator is. And the reason I asked that question is because that was one of the things I was drawn to. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you in is because I do look at you as an educator. And as I kind of told you before we recorded, I've been listening to it for years. I love all the Mac-based podcasts you've been on, and it's fantastic. But like you said, the core part of who you are and who your business is this education screencast. Which is great.
Well, I always get some good comments from people, and it always fascinates me that that there is no sort of typical audience member. I have people who are elderly. I have people who are brand new to the Mac. I have, real Mac heads who've been Mac users for many more years than I have been. And yet, each one seems to be able to take what they need from the screencast. So it might be, someone's been using an application that I'm covering. They might have been using it for 3 or 4 years. Yet they will still take the time to sit down and watch the screencast, and they will feed back that, hey, I use this application all the time, but I found at least 3 or 4 different things that, you brought out that I hadn't appreciated, which is great. And that's the sort of thing I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, because they're only short screencasts. They're not like lynda.com or something where you have like 6-hour tutorials on the pro apps. These are half-hour, tightly produced, really. I don't really waffle too much, at least I don't think so. I do sit down and work out the structure of what I want to cover. It might run on for 2 or 3 episodes if it's a particularly complex application. But, I just want to pull out the nuggets of interest that people might have to give them a base level of knowledge and also a level of confidence so they can go ahead and explore the application further. But invariably, these little snippets or these little gold nuggets pop out and people latch onto them and appreciate that.
And I think that's definitely a skill to quickly consume how a product or software works and then dispel it into language that people can understand and get value from.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so, because that's one of the. People often ask, well, how do you know all this software to the level that you seem to know it? And the truth is, I don't really until I actually sit down and start working out how I'm actually going to cover that week's topic. At which point, I probably go into it in more depth than someone would normally do. But that's the benefit. I do some of the heavy lifting, and then people who watch the screencast can sort of get the benefit of that. But I am able to go in and within half a day sort of pull apart an app and understand how it works, and then formulate in my head how I would put some of these topics across to people.
What advice would you give to somebody who just wants to maybe start out creating a course, or not that they want to copy you, but you're doing a good job, you're one of the industry leaders, and there is it's such a growing market. So what advice would you say to somebody that's thinking about this, or maybe they already have a course and they want to up their game?
Yeah, it's really difficult. When I started, it was very, the landscape was quite different now in that there weren't that many sources of tutorials that you could get on the internet. Whereas now, you've only got to go to YouTube and you'll see tons and tons and tons of stuff. There's lots of vendors now who've set up shop and are selling courses, etc. So I think that the difficult thing for people now is to get their voice heard, is to really just make themselves visible to people. I don't particularly know what the answer is, but I think that's the major problem for people these days. Obviously, you've got your social media and stuff like that, but it's really hard. To get the word out, basically.
And it kind of boils down to what Michael Hyatt talks about in his book, Platform. The tagline of his book is How to Get Noticed in a Noisy World. And it is about building your platform. Yeah. Whether it's through social media or blogging or whatever that system is, that's the key. So whenever I talk to beginners that are wanting to create courses and teach people and help people, that's one of the key things we talk about is the marketing and what's your platform. Because it's easy to, look at you and be like, wow, Don's doing a fantastic job. I want to be just like him. Well, how much hard work it took. And
and it's taken 8 years, to
Sure.
sort of build it up to where it is. And in the early days, I couldn't survive with just the membership system. I had to do other things as well. So that's probably another thing that I learned early on is sort of trying to do multiple things at the same time. So I did some sponsorship arrangements with vendors of popular applications. So people didn't know me, but they knew the app, and then I did a tutorial for that app, and it was on their website, and people started to get to know me that way. I do sort of not so much for my show, but I might actually do a commission screencast for a software vendor, and again they would put that on their site, and that would bring people back to me. So it's a bit of a long haul, to be honest. And certainly don't expect overnight success on this sort of thing. You need to, and again, I think if you're looking at selling your content online, you need to have or you need to be demonstrate integrity and reliability and consistency. You always got to produce good stuff, but it's always got to be there where people expect it, and it is a hard slog, but over time, if your stuff is good enough,
Sure.
you get there.
And it's like everything else in life that you do, the things that are worthwhile take
Mhm.
time and you got to build, it takes momentum. I
Yeah.
was just talking with somebody today and we were saying, those overnight successes we love to idolize. Well, they're rarely overnight successes. They just like
Yeah.
somebody could look at you and be like, oh, that Don McAllister, he's an overnight success. And
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
look at him and say, no, absolutely
No.
not. It's been a long, long road.
Yeah. And it's hard work as well. I mean, I used to
Sure.
work in corporate IT, and I did my dues. I worked hard there, but when I left, the work level shot up. But it's a different sort of work. It's more enjoyable. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing work that you enjoy, so it doesn't really feel like work. In fact, in some instances, you have to back off a bit, because you're probably working too much. But
I can relate to that exactly.
Yeah.
I love what I do. It's the best.
Yeah.
In fact, it's funny. Scrolling through Twitter on Friday afternoons, you see people, oh, can't wait, TGIF or can't wait to the weekend. I'm like, oh man, the weekend's coming. Like,
Yeah.
I have so many more things I want to do. Obviously, I
being
love
there.
my family, my kids,
Sure.
but I love what I do. It's a blessing. It's a true blessing. Where do you see online courses going in the future? Are we at the beginning, the middle? Are we oversaturated, undersaturated, or how do you see this landscape of online training or online courses?
Yeah, that's another good one. I wouldn't say we're reaching saturation, but there is so much stuff out there. It takes a lot to get picked up on, I think. I think one of the reasons why I think I've been so successful or been able to sort of prolong what I've been doing is building up an audience who like the stuff that I do and like the way that I do it. So I think a lot of for the want of a better term, personal branding or people with a certain way of teaching. I think there's plenty of scope for more and more of those people to be in the marketplace and to find their niche and provide content for their niche. That's certainly not saturated. I think there's lots and lots of potential, and the different subject areas as well. I mean, my particular subject area. It's always surprised me that, in the 8 years, I thought initially, well, I'd start doing this and then, there'd be half a dozen other people doing the same thing and it would be a battle. It's not really happened, to be honest. I mean, there's the big boys, there's Linda, as I mentioned before, and a couple of other larger organizations, but there's no real other sort of single shop guys sort of doing a similar thing, or that I'm aware of anyway. I'm sure there are.
Sure.
But, it's not in my space anyway, people have tried, but they've fallen by the wayside.
Well, you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you structured some interesting deals with different vendors where, you would create a screencast and they would sponsor it.
Yeah.
Have you found that a lot of companies are receptive to that? Because I like structuring business deals creatively, and that's a creative idea. Was it hard to pitch that, or was it a no-brainer for them?
It was pretty much a no-brainer because of the benefits they got out of it. Because in the early days, I mean, to be honest, I don't do it that often now. It's very rare because I've built the membership up to a level whereby the membership sustains the business, so I don't have to do sponsorships or stuff like that or commission screencasts. I can focus on my main day job now. But what I found was that the hard pitch was that initially nobody knew who I was, so that was quite difficult. But by doing a training video, they could sponsor a training video. It'd be half an hour's worth of content. They could use it on their website. I'd ask them, what's their top 5 support issues that they have, and I'd work those into the screencast so that they could, point people to the screencast to sort a majority of their support issues out. They could use it for marketing if they wanted to. They could use it for customer training. So it's so many benefits to them that I think in most cases it really was a no-brainer for them.
Yeah, we do a similar thing with some of our corporate clients, where, in essence, they're hiring us as a creative agency or a media marketing company because, the benefits are there. By creating these video tutorials, it is a no-brainer, but it's just interesting to know, who gets it, and I'm sure a few of them maybe don't, who knows, but those aren't the ones you want to work with anyway. But yeah.
Well, that's right. And the big problem initially that I found, and I still haven't got the answer to it, is pricing as well. How to price your services or how to price your content. It's very, very difficult because obviously you don't want to undersell it. But again, if you get the pricing wrong, it puts a lot of people off, especially, with the app economy now, with apps pushing prices of apps down, things like that. It gets very complex, really.
Yeah.
And in the early days, it was horrendous. I just didn't have a clue how to pitch it properly.
So Don, where can people find out more about you online or your websites or on social media?
Well, the best place to go, the main site is screencastsonline.com, and that's where the main membership site is. And there are links from there to the Screencast Online Academy. If you want to go directly there, that's screencastsonlineacademy.com. And I also have a monthly magazine as well. I repurpose the monthly tutorials in the form of an iPad and iPhone magazine. That's the Screencast Online Monthly Mag. That's in the newsstand. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's Don McAllister. And that's probably about it, really. I mainly hang out on Twitter for my virtual water cooler during the day.
Cool. Don, thanks so much for being on the show here. We could have gone on a lot longer, but I want to respect your time and get you out of here. But thank you so much for being on the show.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for the invite.
Well, there you go. I knew you would love that interview, man. I had a great time talking with him. I know that if you got half as much out of it as I did, you're going to walk away from this podcast really excited. I also have something really cool for you, just as a gift, as a thank you. If you go to onlinecoursecoach.com/Don, you'll be taken to the podcast page for this episode, and you can download a free extended audio part where I ask Don what his favorite productivity tools are, because Don does a lot of things with his screencasts and magazine and online university and all these things. What are some tools that keep him going, that keep him productive, that keep him streamlined, especially with the team that he has? And he goes into depth with those tools. So go to onlinecoursecoach.com/Don to get that free audio. Well, I am really excited. I know I keep saying that for this podcast. We're going to have episodes come out here, on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. And I have a lot of guests lined up, a lot of really cool interviews where you can learn not just from me, because we'll have plenty of those, and I want to teach you, everything I know, but I also want to interview some industry leaders in the different spaces they are. So I have a list. It's actually really long, but if you have different people you think I should be interviewing, go ahead, send me an email at jeff@onlinecoursecoach.com. Tell me who I should interview. Get me in touch with them. I'd love to reach out and see if we can bring them on the show. So keep coming back for more. Keep creating online courses, because I really believe that, we're going to be training a lot of people, myself, you, we're going to be helping, serving a lot of people through our online courses. And that's only going to grow as more and more people, not just here in the United States of America, but worldwide, continue to get online, continue to get trained online through various things, whether it's in their workforce, whether they want to learn a new skill, improve something they already have, or, just improve their life overall. So keep coming back to the show. I can't wait for more episodes. We'll talk to you soon.